Hey, glad to be back. Edition of frequently asked questions for commercial real estate, coming to you live from our new office. So we just signed a lease for our new company, Summit Commercial Group, located here in Louisville, Kentucky, and we're actually located in the conference room right now. We're still working on finalizing some of the furniture in the office, but we're really excited about this new endeavor. But to start off, I wanted to create a new video to share a topic that's actually very prevalent and important in our business, and that is having difficult conversations. And this particular video will focus on having difficult conversations with clients because at the end of the day, we're trying to serve them to the best of our ability. And in order to do that, sometimes that means having difficult conversations that may be uncomfortable for you. And so you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable in these types of scenarios. And so in today's video, we're going to go through a few case studies as to how you can approach different types of difficult conversations. Now, before we dive into this video, I'd greatly appreciate if you can like and subscribe to this channel. It really does help with the YouTube algorithm, ensures more and more people can hear this message and learn about the many facets of commercial real estate. So now you've done that, go ahead and like and subscribe below. Let's go ahead and dive into this episode. All right, so the topic today is having difficult conversations with clients. And I've worked with or had conversations with many agents who have come to me for advice about different situations, about how to approach a client about a particular topic. And I thought this would be a great video to be able to share some insights or feedback regarding some different types of scenarios. Now, I won't say that I'm perfect at having difficult conversations, but I will say that I've gotten to a point now in my career where I'm not afraid to have these types of conversations, and I've gotten much better about ways to handle certain situations to ensure that the message is actually is conveyed properly, and that everyone on the in the interaction understands where everything stands and everyone's on the same page. That doesn't mean that people aren't going to be upset sometimes about the situation, but in reality, that's you can't control what people's feelings are, necessarily how they feel about a particular situation. All you can control is the way that you relay that message and to ensure that you're doing what's right for your client based on that situation. So let's walk through a few different scenarios that are very common in the commercial real brokerage business and see if we can identify ways to be able to handle some of those conversations. So the first is very common, in particular when you're looking to list commercial property, is that the client or the potential client, their expectations on pricing is just too high. So I'm sure many of you have run across a situation where a person has a property that they were interested in potentially selling, but maybe they're way out of whack with what their expectations are on pricing. Sometimes that's just ignorance. They don't know what the pricing is. And so that's where you come in to be able to kind of explain what the market looks like. So to start off, when you hear a price from a seller or a landlord about rent expectations that's out of whack with what the market is, listen to their reasoning. Ask them, how did you come to that number? How did you come to that value? To kind of get an understanding of what exactly they're using as far as a reference point. Sometimes they'll reference something along the lines of, well, the building down the street sold for this price, so my building must be worth a similar price. And that's when you can come in and provide examples as to why that may not be the case, because maybe the building isn't on a main thoroughfare. Maybe there's certain characteristics about the other property that are unique that aren't affiliated or that this property doesn't have. So you can create an opportunity to address some of those preconceived notions that the landlord or the owner has that may or may not apply to their particular building. And then also, coming ready and prepared to be able to provide some examples that showcase that your pricing expectations are more in line with the marketplace, and then providing that to them. Sometimes that can get a little contentious because you're telling them that their baby, in their case, maybe their property that they've owned for many years, that they've had a lot of emotional energy that has been placed in these properties. You're telling them their baby's ugly, when in reality, maybe they don't want to hear that. So it's one of those things where all you can do is listen to what they have to tell you, really get an understanding of what their expectations are, and then address those preconceived notions by providing examples as to why you think this particular pricing strategy is the most appropriate. And then sometimes, and even in those situations when you do provide that data and share some of that information, the seller or owner may not be ready to listen to your pricing expectations. And in those situations, you have to determine whether or not it's worth taking on the assignment. A lot of people earlier in the career get bogged down in trying to just, take on anything that comes to them, even though the pricing expectations way out of whack. And the problem with taking on a responsibility like that from a seller or an owner that their pricing expectations not in line with market is that you could damage not only your reputation, but you can get the seller or owner upset with you because maybe you told them, hey, yeah, we can get that price, when in reality it's not realistic. And the longer this property sits vacant or not sold, now the owner is upset with you because you set an expectation that wasn't realistic. And so sometimes it's okay to just walk away from a property and not move forward with it if in fact you think it's going to be hard to really achieve the mark that the owner has because it's just unrealistic. But if you decide that you do want to take on that responsibility, just understand that it may take time for them to come around to that realization. So as offers and people and letters of intent start coming in and they're closer in line with where market's at, it's just constantly presenting it to the owner and reinforcing it and trying to make sure that over time they can come around as far as their expectations. But a lot of times when you present a lot of the information to an owner and they're unwilling to budge on their expectations and there's no real reason as to why that's the case, sometimes it's just better to walk away, and that's okay. I would encourage you to do that instead of beating your head against the wall to try to satisfy an expectation that's unrealistic, and then everyone gets upset in the process. So that's number one, the pricing expectation being too high and being able to present the proper data in front of the owner or the seller to ensure that they understand what the expectations are for the marketplace. So that's number one. Number two is negotiations. Now, this is something that is an art, not a science. And so there's some times where taking a very strong stance on price reduction works for you, and then there's other times where it bites you in the butt because maybe a deal falls apart and now you're stuck in a cycle where that the new buyers now have a stigma pertaining to the property, and it could create a dynamic whereby you're not going to be able to achieve the same level of pricing that you were expecting to in the original transaction. So let's take this particular situation from a couple angles. So to start out, let's say that you are representing the seller of a property. You go under contract. There was a frenzy of buyers that were interested in buying this property. And you go under contract and you go through due diligence. During the due diligence process, something is uncovered, right? The buyers sometimes play games and they'll say, oh, well, we found this particular issue with the property and we want to be able to reduce the price by this amount to cover this expense. Now, as the seller, you have to kind of get an understanding of what the landscape looks like for reselling the property to another buyer if you were to, in fact, go out of contract. And so I think that's where the assessment piece comes into play. So you as the representative have to go out and kind of paint this picture for the seller. And sometimes that's an uncomfortable picture. So let's say in this scenario, there's a lot of people who are interested in the property prior to going on under contract. And so maybe you can stick to your guns a little bit more because you have more leverage, knowing that if in fact this buyer decides to back out, there's 2 or 3 more buyers waiting in the wings. But there also could be situations where the marketplace is not really interested in the offering, or maybe it's taken you a long time to identify a particular buyer that's qualified, in which case you don't have the same amount of leverage and you have to really understand where you are in the marketplace. And so sometimes when buyers come back to the seller and request a reduction in price, that sometimes can be conceived or perceived by the seller as a slight, in particular if there wasn't a clear expectation set on the front end regarding taking the property as is or whatever else. And so you as the buyer's agent or the seller's agent has to be able to convey to the seller, based on what leverage you have, what stance you should take. And sometimes that stance is contrary to what the seller wants to do, like instinctually. Maybe the seller says, we're not going to give him anything, but maybe the best route to take in that scenario is to say, hey, Mr. Client, I think that the best route to take here would be to try to find a meaningful resolution with this particular buyer, because up until this point, we've had limited amount of showings, or we've had a limited amount of offers, or the offers that have come in have been much lower than this particular offer that we received from this buyer. And so you have to weigh all these different data points prior to making your final decision. And sometimes that requires you to have those difficult conversations with your clients because their instincts is to do one thing when in reality the best route may be to do another. So the approach that I would take in these situations is to, number one, understand your leverage, get an understanding of what the layout looks like for the transaction, and then prep everything before the call, and then have a conversation with your client, a candid conversation about where things stand and what the routes are that you can take and what you think the best route is based on the information that's in front of you. And sometimes the client goes along with what you have to say and you're able to move forward, or sometimes they decide to stick to their guns in whatever that is, whether they're on the buy side or the sell side. And you have to kind of go along with that and hope for the best as far as the transaction is concerned. But understand that you need to be able to have those conversations with your clients to ensure that you are properly representing them, because just going along with what your client says all the time is not properly serving your client. You have to be able to have these difficult conversations in a variety of different capacities to ensure that your client is being the best represented. So in negotiations, understand your leverage, get all the data points in front of you, understand the dynamics at play within the transaction, and then have the conversation with your client about the best course of action. And this applies to both the buy side and the sale side. So that's number two. Number three is commission conversation. So when you're looking to list a property for lease or list a property for sale, the topic of commissions is going to come up. So you have to be prepared to be able to advocate for what you're offering to the client. And so, some of the more common approaches is, hey, I would like you to reduce your commission in this situation to this amount. Well, you have to be able to say, well, I appreciate your thought process there, but this is why I'm asking for this commission. And here are all the reasons and the things that I'm going to be doing for you that are going to outcompete whoever you're going to ultimately talk to as far as competition. Because if they're interviewing 3 or 4 different people and commission's a big piece of their consideration as far as who they go with, you have to give them an understanding that, hey, yes, maybe my commission that I'm requesting is higher than my competitor, but at the end of the day, you're not going to get the same level of service. You're not going to get the same level of marketing. You're not going to get the same level of network that these people that I have as compared to my competition. And that's why you're paying a little bit extra, because in reality, you're not paying a little bit extra because I will be able to likely achieve a higher price for your building than these people will be able to achieve. And since I get paid on a percentage anyways, the more money that I make as a commission based on the percentage, that means you're making more money on the building sale or the building lease. So it's one of those things where you have to be able to present the information to the client in a way that justifies what you're asking as far as a commission. And these can be uncomfortable conversations because they're asking you to do something that you may or may not want to do, and that's an uncomfortable dynamic. So my recommendation in commission conversations is to come ready with receipts. Come ready and say, hey, look, this is why we're charging what we're charging. Provide case studies as to how you've been helping clients in a similar situation achieve a similar type of goal and what were the results that they achieved. Because if you come prepared and you're willing to have that conversation, you likely are going to be able to better advocate for your commissions, and you'll have better outcomes for your business as a result in the long run. So that's number 3, is commission conversations. And then finally, for this video, we'll talk about situations where you drop the ball. I mean, there's going to be situations where things don't go as planned. There's going to be times where you're not on point like you typically are, and you miss something, or you make a mistake, or you're not as engaged as you should be in certain situations, and things get missed. Now, everyone is human, so things happen, but the way that you respond to those situations is what defines you as a person and defines your character. So if something happens like this and a client is upset as a result of an action you've taken or an inaction you've taken, you have to find ways to remedy the situation. The best way that I've found to do it is to just have a conversation and explain, number one, that you're apologetic about the situation and that it won't happen again, and then share action steps as how you're going to be able to improve the situation going forward. And then periodically share follow-ups as to how you've been able to make a difference based on that previous conversation that you had with your client. Now, there are situations too where, you know, the mistake is so big that you're not going to be able to remedy the situation. But even in a situation where, you know, an uncomfortable conversation takes place and the client decides that you're not someone they want to continue working with, it at the end of the day, you are going to be a better person for it. It's going to be a way for you to refine your integrity and character over time so that it can better serve you in future transactions. And understand that everyone's human and everyone makes mistakes, but don't allow yourself to get in a situation where you make the same mistake twice, because at that point it becomes a habit, and there's no excuse to make lack of performance a habit. So hopefully you gain some value from this video. I thought it would just be a good way for me to kind of share some insights pertaining to different difficult conversations that you can have with clients and ways that you can approach the conversation. You know, I'm sure I could have a 3-hour video about different ways that you can approach different situations. I wanted to know if you find value from this video, so please like and subscribe. It does make a big difference in our ability to reach a broader audience. And put notes in the comments. I really do want to hear your feedback, and I'm looking forward to hearing you guys going forward. Along with that, we just started a new company called Summit Commercial Group. It's a commercial brokerage firm and business sales firm located here in Louisville, Kentucky. If you're looking to buy, sell, or lease commercial property or acquire a business here in Louisville, Kentucky, you can reach out to me at 502-536-7315, or you can email me at Raphael at sumcg.com. Sum is SUMCG.com. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.